Hello, everyone. This is the version of the literature term notes with audio. Yeah, we've already talked a little bit about how literary devices, literature terms, figures of speech all mean the same thing and how they help us create figurative language, which is the opposite of literal language. And sorry. And helps us learn about, helps us explain ourselves better in a way that is more interesting to read. So, the first type of literary device that we can use is our point of view. This is very basic. So, you've got first person narration, which is when a character tells the story. It uses I, we, me, us. Think of diary entries. A lot of stories are just told, even without the diary entry, about just how one character feels. You don't get the other perspectives of other characters. There is third person limited narration, which is when the story is told from an outside narrator who knows specifically what one character thinks and feels. So they do use the pronouns he, she, they, but they don't tell you the entire story from that one character. So, for example, Harry Potter would be an example of third person limited narration because you follow Harry's life, you don't follow everyone's life. An example of the next one, third person omniscient, would be something more like Game of Thrones, which is where you get a story told by a different character each chapter, or a third person narration each chapter. So you get like a really round view. So when the outside narrator knows everything about what characters think and feel, still using he, she, they, a lot of times this is more of a godlike or all knowing narrator. When we read The Book Thief, we'll have some good conversations about whether or not the narrator is limited or is third person omniscient, or is even first person narration. Narration isn't always really straightforward. Another type of narration that isn't listed is second person narration, which is going to be like a lot of instructional manuals use this. It uses words like you. So it's, you jump over the hill, you look down, you see. There are some very innovative avant-garde books that use second person, but traditionally it's not as used in literature. So Peter Pan is one of them that uses second person narration sometimes. Okay, next we have mood. Mood is the feeling created in the reader, created by descriptive details. So this is going to be how you feel when reading the text. So say that there's a situation where there's a character talking about the death of her grandma, but she's talking about it in a way that's uh, maybe really disrespectful. But you, as the reader, because you know more about the circumstance, maybe you are super sad by what's happening. You are feeling horribly, horribly sad because you know that the character loves her grandma. She's just angry, and you feel for her, but you feel sad. So mood is how you feel. And then the next one that we have is tone, which is how the writer is writing, the writer's attitude toward his or her audience or subject. So, like in this scenario that we've created, the writer has made a character that is feeling very like sarcastic and disrespectful and maybe a little mean, right? You might be sad, maybe you see the larger picture, but they're in a place where it's a little more vicious. The mood and tone can be very similar, but it's important to know the distinction between the two. Next, we've got imagery. Imagery is something I'm sure you've heard of before. It's using descriptive or figurative language to paint a picture in the mind of a reader. It really capitalizes on our five senses, our sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing capabilities, comparisons, and other strategies to make the readers feel as if they are there, right? The cool breeze smelled salty as I lay in my hammock by the ocean. Like you can smell it, maybe you can taste the salt a little bit, you can see the situation going on, you can feel the breeze. It gives us a lot more detail than to say like I went to lay down, right? Like it gives us more than that. Next, we've got symbols. Symbols are incredibly important in literature because authors use symbols to help deepen the meaning of their text in a way that is both beautiful and very effective. When you use a symbol, you don't have to explain yourself every single time. So, a symbol is anything that stands for or represents something else. So, like, this could be an object that stands for an idea, it could be a character that stands for an idea, it could be a scenario, like an entire book could be a symbol for another book. And actually, that's called an allegory. Like 1984 is a book about farm animals, but the entire book is a symbol for the USSR. So it's an allegory. I don't think we have that word today, but it's good to know. So you've got the American flag, oftentimes represents freedom. Hearts often represent love. Anything that's an emoji is a symbol. So that's a good way to look at it. Theme. Theme is a little bit more complicated than the rest of the terms today, but the basic idea is it is the central message or insight into the life revealed through a literary work. So it's an insight into life. This should maybe not say the. Boop. Perfect. So it's an insight into life revealed through a literary work. So if you think of like Dora the Explorer or those kids shows that at the end are like, what did we learn? And then they're like, we learned to be nice to our friends. That's a theme. It's usually revealed in the resolution, although sometimes text can do things differently. There can be lots of themes in one piece of literature. So if you've ever read a book and got a different message from it, a different lesson than somebody else, that would be an example of that happening. If you watched Toy Story and you learned, always be there for your friends, but your friend watched Toy Story and they learned that you should never give up on people who need help. You got a different theme, and you're not wrong. Themes aren't specific to one piece of literature; they can be applied to everyone's own life. So, for example, the themes I was just describing there, like don't give up on people who need help. Like you could apply that to a bunch of other texts and movies and shows and literature. You'll notice none of the themes that I stated were like your toys are talking when you leave, because that's not applicable. That's not a life lesson. That's a statement that is specific to that particular text. Themes are more than just a topic. So if you have just one word, that's a topic. Themes need a little bit more. So, like, love is not a theme, it's a topic. Because I don't know how you feel about love. Is love good? Is love bad? But love conquers all is a theme, where the author is trying to say that love can overcome any obstacles. So, you get more details. So, if I ask you, what is a theme of American Born Chinese? And you said racism, that would be not helpful, because I don't know, like, what are you saying about racism? Is it nuanced? Is it, something we can all overcome? Is it a challenge in our daily life? Like, you've got to give me a little bit more. Like, racism is, love is, and there are variations of that. But that's a good place to start. Next, we've got similes. You're definitely familiar with this. We've got a figure of speech which has a direct comparison between two unlike things, usually with the words like or as. Sometimes than will raise its head as well. We've got a metaphor, which is a figure of speech that involves a comparison between two unlike things that uses a form of be. So the road was a ribbon wrapped through the desert. My sister is a goose. There's no like or as. It's just like blank is blank. Personification is going to be when you give the qualities of a person to an animal, an object, or an idea. The wind yells while blowing, or the cat is screaming at me. Your cat's not actually screaming, right? They're meowing in a way that sounds a lot like screaming, which is something that we identify mostly with humans. Next, we've got alliteration. Alliteration is a lot of the times used by authors to draw attention to certain words. It's not necessarily something that it's kind of like a flag, right? When you see an author use alliteration, you're like, oh, it like makes you pay attention a little bit more. So, kind of jumping back to Harry Potter as an example, like you have Salazar Slytherin, Godfrey Gryffindor, I think, and Helga Hufflepuff, and I don't remember the Ravenclaw name, but like they're alliterative. It helps. It like makes you like, oh, it sticks in your mind a little bit more. So it's a notice from the author that we need to pay attention. So those are the repeated consonant sounds occurring at the beginning of words or within words. It could be either way. So we have, she was wide-eyed and wondering while she waited for Walter to waken. This makes me think of a little bit of Breaking Bad, if you've ever seen that. Walter White, a lot of superheroes will have alliterative names. Clark Kent, moments like that. So they just stick in your mind a little bit more. It's kind of a marketing technique for authors if you think about it. Then we have assonance, which are identical or similar sounds between internal vowels and neighboring words. And this does the same thing as alliteration, where it's just bringing attention to something that's happening in the story. So how, now, brown, cow, all have that ow sound within them. Onomatopoeia is the use of words that mimic sounds. So kaboom is a word that is an onomatopoeia. Actually, there's two onomatopoeias in this example. The second one is crack, firecracker. Crack makes the sound of what it is. A brook trickles. Trickles sounds a little bit like what it is. So any of those words are onomatopoeia. An allusion. A good way to remember allusion is just the word reference. An allusion is a reference. So it's a brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of historical, cultural, literary, or political significance. So In our examples here, we have like, don't act like such a Romeo in front of her. This is maybe not super usable, but the idea that somebody's being, flirty. Like Romeo is known for a play that's entirely about love, and so somebody's being flirty. Kevin isn't good at math, but in art, he's a real Picasso, right? Like it's emphasizing like Kevin knows his stuff about art, and so through a reference, it explains something else. So yeah, a reference. Allusions are reference. Hyperbole, when the author uses exaggeration for effect, not to lie to the readers, right? There are moments where your author would lie to you, but this is not that. About something being much bigger or much smaller than it usually is, right? So I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Like, no, you can't. You would die. Weren't you listening? She said it 1,000 times. And remember that hyperbole is not just the big aspect, it's also the small aspect. So if you said, like it was as like if somebody's like, I caught a fish this big, and then you're like, nah, it was the size of my thumb, right? Like it could be either way. That's both of those are examples of hyperbole. Idioms are common sayings or phrases that where the meaning is not exactly the words that are said. It could not be directly translated into another language. Like it's not a literal saying. Idioms are oftentimes also other sorts of figurative language, other sorts of literary devices. So, like, take a chill pill is an idiom. If you were a person learning this language, you'd be like, is there medication that like you want me to take? Do you want to hang out after school? Like you're not asking somebody if you want to like go find a tree and just like put your hands on it and just hang there. Like you're asking them if they want to spend time together. So any of those moments are going to be idioms. They also could probably be classified as other forms of literary devices as well. So just keep an eye out there. The part that makes it an idiom is that it's common. So just be aware of that. An oxymoron, contradictory terms that appear in conjunction. It's really interesting that as humans, we find that opposites can oftentimes define something in a way that's really intriguing. So passive aggressive, right? Somebody is being aggressive, but they're doing it kind of passively. A deafening silence, right? Silence that is it's so important and so big that it's loud. A love-hate relationship, right? Kind of demonstrating a back and forth moment. And then we have extended metaphor. So much like metaphor, this is still a comparison of unlike things, but this is something that is continued and brought up over and over again throughout a text. So it's going to be longer than a single sentence, and it doesn't have to be all in one chunk. It's not like there's a paragraph and like that's your metaphor. In John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, which I imagine you'll read throughout the years, every once in a while he throws in a chapter about a turtle, and the turtle is like a symbol, and it becomes an ongoing metaphor or an extended metaphor throughout the book. I see now that I'm very Harry Potter focused, and I apologize for that. Harry Potter is just something that most of us have seen. So Harry Potter's lightning-shaped scar is an extended metaphor that the danger that Voldemort represents, right? Because lightning is dangerous. It's not like the scar that was on his forehead was like in the shape of a flower, like, right? J.K. Rowling chose a lightning strike for a very specific reason, right? It's not a smiley face scar. That would be like not helpful or meaningful. So it's a lightning strike, and then it's kind of oncoming. It warns of danger. So if you think of like you see lightning and then you hear the thunder, right? Because light travels faster than sound. He would like be warned of Voldemort via his lightning-shaped scar, and then the sound, the thunder, was like Voldemort actually appearing. Wow, deep into Harry Potter 101 today, guys. And last but not least, we have Synecdoche, and make sure you practice saying that on your own. It goes Synecdoche. Like, it makes me think a little bit of like, do you know Dewey? Synecdoche. It is a part made to represent the whole. So a lot of times we'll reference a part of something to represent all of something. So the crown chose to execute all of the criminals. Well, no, like the crown didn't do that. The crown is an inanimate object that can't do anything. But the king or the queen or the royalty, the monarchy could do it. Kansas City won the World Series in 2015. Like, no, the whole of Kansas City did not. But this is kind of backwards. It's the whole to represent a part, but it still works. The Royals won the World Series in 2015. And then America as a word is often used as a synecdoche because we'll say like, we'll reference America as the USA, when in reality, like America encompasses both North and South America because it's not specific at all. So yeah, synecdoches affect a lot of how we talk about things. Thank you for listening. If you didn't, like, stop and pause throughout the video to take notes, make sure you're doing that. It's really important that you have these down. If you need to learn this in a different way, let me know, and move on to the practice when you feel ready.